Okay, so ready to dive into another deep dive?
Always.
This time we're going to tackle a character from One Piece, and I think this will be a fun one.
Oh.
It's Absalom of the Graveyard.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got a bunch of different sources, like descriptions of devil fruits, encyclopedia entries, and even some first-hand accounts of his, let's call them interesting moments.
Right.
Absalom is a very interesting
Oh, he is?
character. He's a zombie leader, a devil fruit user, and a reporter. I mean, that's crazy. You really can't make this stuff up.
It's like Oda just threw everything at the wall to see what stuck.
It really does.
But it makes for a fascinating deep dive.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do we even begin with this guy?
I think a good place to start would be with his role on Thriller Bark. He was one of the mysterious four, the leaders of Gecko Moria's zombie army.
Right, the Mysterious Four. They sound pretty cool. Less cool is his nickname, Absalom.
Right.
It seems like he got that name because of his amorous nature, which we'll get into later.
His behavior towards women is definitely something we need to address.
Yeah, complicating is one way to put it. I'd say he's downright creepy, especially when he tried to kidnap Nami.
Yeah, and make her his bride.
Yeah.
And it's disturbing that his ideal partner, according to the sources, was a weak woman who cannot fight back.
Oh, yikes. Not good.
No, not at all.
But this seems to be kind of a theme in One Piece, right? This whole clash between powerful men and the women who, refuse to be controlled by them.
Absolutely. Boa Hancock, Big Mom, even Nami herself. They all challenge the idea that women are weak or subservient.
It makes you wonder if Oda is purposely, trying to show the strength of women even in this kind of world.
It's a very interesting element, for sure. And with Absalom, it definitely leads to his downfall.
Oh, yeah. He gets taken down by Nami.
Exactly. A woman he thought was weak.
Talk about poetic justice.
Yeah.
But before we get to all that, let's back up a bit. I mean, before all the creepy stuff, Absalom was already pretty strange, right? He's always wearing that suit, looking all dapper.
Right, yeah. But underneath it all, he's got a secret. A rather big one.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
Turns out, he's kind of a Frankenstein's monster. He was stitched together from the parts of different animals by Hogback, that genius surgeon.
Wait, what's stitched together? Like, what kind of animal parts are we talking?
Well, he's got elephant skin, a lion's muzzle, and the muscles of a bear and a gorilla. It's wild.
Whoa. It's like Hogback wanted to create the ultimate warrior.
Exactly.
But do you think, on a psychological level, that had any kind of impact on Absalom? Did he even consider himself human?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it might tie into his obsession with finding a bride. Maybe he was searching for some sort of connection, validation, some proof that he was still human.
That's kind of a sad thought, actually.
It is, yeah. But his way of going about it was obviously totally messed up.
Okay, so let's talk about that amorous nature we mentioned earlier. It wasn't just the bride thing, was it? He was kind of a perv, right?
Well, that's where his devil fruit power comes in. The Suke no Mi, or the clear fruit. It gave him the power to turn invisible.
No way. So not only is he a zombie Frankenstein monster, but he can also disappear. That's awesome. And also kind of scary.
Definitely both. And unfortunately, he used that invisibility to, spy on women.
Seriously. That's taking it too far, even for a pirate.
Yeah, not his finest moment.
Okay, so we've got this powerful, creepy dude with invisibility powers and a thing for kidnapping brides. Where do we even go from here?
Well, I think it's time to talk about his showdown with Sanji. That's where things get really interesting.
Well, yeah, the invisible pervert versus the love-struck cook.
It's a classic One Piece matchup for sure.
And wasn't that fight, really personal for Sanji?
It was, because you see, Sanji had always dreamed of having the clear fruit power himself. He thought he could use it for, chivalrous things, like rescuing damsels in distress.
And maybe sneaking a peek at a lady's bath, but at least his heart was in the right place.
Definitely less creepy than Absalom's intentions. So you can imagine how furious Sanji was when he saw Absalom using this power for, the exact opposite reason.
I bet. And Sanji, he really let Absalom have it, right?
Oh, he did. Absalom was totally outmatched.
But it's interesting, right? It's like Sanji was rejecting Absalom's twisted version of that power, So we've got his role on Thriller Bark, the creepy bride thing, the Frankenstein reveal, and the beatdowns from both Sanji and Nami. Where do we go from here?
Well, believe it or not, the story doesn't end there. Absalom's journey takes him beyond Thriller Bark, and it gets even wilder.
Seriously, I can't wait to hear what happens next.
So we've seen Absalom at his, let's say, not so best. But remember, this is One Piece, where things aren't always black and white.
Right. Like we've seen bad guys turn good and good guys with a bit of a dark side.
Exactly.
So what about Absalom? Is there like a redemption arc in his future?
I wouldn't call it a redemption arc, but he does do some interesting things. Well, first of all, he escapes Thriller Bark with Moria and Hogback. They actually stick together.
Oh, that's kind of sweet in a weird way.
Right. It's like this odd little family unit.
They even rescue Moria from Doflamingo after the Marineford War.
Yeah. Talk about loyalty.
So even after that whole beatdown, they still have each other's backs.
It's pretty impressive.
But what about Absalom himself? What does he do after, the whole Thriller Bark thing?
This is where it gets kind of crazy.
Oh, I like great.
He pops up again after the time skip, but now he's going by Absa.
Absa, okay.
And get this, he's a freelance reporter.
Wait, a reporter? Seriously?
Yeah.
How does a zombie with invisibility powers even blend in as a reporter?
Well, that's the thing. His invisibility becomes his greatest asset.
Oh, I see. He could get all the best scoops.
Exactly. No one would even know he was there.
He could be like the ultimate undercover journalist.
I mean, imagine the stories he could uncover. He could be a real game changer.
But wouldn't that be like kind of unethical too? Using invisibility to spy on people?
Definitely a bit of a gray area.
Yeah, for sure.
But he did manage to break some big news, like the alliance between Kid, Hawkins, and On Air's crews.
Wow, so maybe there was some good in him after all.
It's possible. Maybe he found a way to use his powers for good.
Maybe being a reporter was his way of, making amends for his past,
It's an interesting thought.
But it's still kind of a bummer how his story ends.
Yeah. It's pretty tragic, actually.
What happened?
Well, the Blackbeard pirates, they killed him.
Oh.
Yeah, they wanted his devil fruit power, and they gave it to Shiryu.
That's awful. It seems like even in death, Absalom couldn't catch a break.
It's true. He was always being used or manipulated by someone.
And didn't Katarina Devon, one of Blackbeard's crew, impersonate him?
Yeah, she did. Using her devil fruit power, she turned into Absalom and basically mocked Moria with it.
That's just cruel.
It really is.
Poor Moria. It's like losing a friend and then having them come back to haunt you.
Right. It just adds insult to injury.
Okay, so we've covered Absalom's loyalty to Moria, his short-lived career as a reporter, and his tragic demise. But looking back at everything, it's hard to say what his legacy really is,
He was a bit of a walking contradiction.
Yeah, he was loyal, but creepy, strong, but also kind of pathetic. It's really hard to define him.
And he wanted to rule graveyards, but ended up being taken out by people who steal the powers of the dead.
That's kind of ironic when you think about it.
Right. He was obsessed with death, but death ultimately consumed him.
It's like his whole life was a setup for that final tragic punchline.
Exactly.
So where do we go from here?
I think it's time to step back and look at the big picture. What does Absalom's story tell us about power, ambition, the choices we make?
Right, we need to connect the dots.
Let's try and untangle the legacy of Absalom of the graveyard.
Okay, so Absalom, definitely a complicated guy, but what's the big takeaway from his story? What's the lesson here, if there is one?
Well, for me, it's all about ambition and how it can be both a good thing and a bad thing. Absalom wanted power. He wanted to be recognized, maybe even loved. But the way he went about it, well, that was all wrong.
Right, like he was always reaching for something, but never quite grabbing it the right way.
Exactly. And I think we can all relate to that. We all have things we want, goals we're chasing.
Yeah.
But Absalom's story shows us that how we go about getting those things matters a lot.
It's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Absalom, he might have started with noble ideas. I mean, who wouldn't want to be invisible? But he just couldn't control those bad impulses, and that's what brought him down in the end.
And it's even more tragic when you remember that he was kind of a victim too. Hogback, with his crazy experiments, he created this being who was torn between his human side and those animal instincts.
It's like a Greek tragedy, isn't it? A character doomed from the start.
Yeah, there's definitely that element to it.
He could have been a good guy, maybe even a hero, but those darker parts of him, they always held him back.
And ultimately, those shadows are what consumed him. The Blackbeard pirates, they represent the worst parts of the One Piece world. All they cared about was power, and they saw Absalom as a way to get more of it.
It's almost ironic, Absalom wanted to control others, but in the end, He was the one being controlled.
Right, his powers were stolen and used against his old captain, Moria.
Which is just like adding insult to injury.
It shows how messed up the One Piece world can be. Even death isn't the end, because your powers can be taken from you and used against the people you care about.
It's like Oda is saying that real strength isn't about your devil fruit or how much you can bench press. It's about the choices you make, the people you surround yourself with, the mark you leave on the world.
And Absalom's story shows us that those choices can have huge consequences, both for you and the people around you.
So what do we want our listeners to take away from all this?
I think it's important to remember that even the villains, the bad guys, they're not always so simple. Absalom, he was a mess, but there was more to him than meets the eye. He makes us think about what makes a person good or bad, and how sometimes those lines can be blurry.
And it makes us think about our own ambitions, right? Are we chasing the right things? Are we going about it the right way?
Exactly. Because in the end, it's not about power or fame, it's about what you leave behind. It's about the people you touched, the connections you made.
Well said. Absalom's story, it might be tragic, but there's a lot we can learn from it.
Absolutely. Even in the darkest corners of the One Piece world, there are lessons to be learned, and maybe even a glimmer of hope.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the mystery that was Absalom of the Graveyard. What do you think his legacy is? Head over to our social media and tell us what you think. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.